Hello everyone, a warm welcome to this webinar on crafting a compelling application for top 15 B schools. I'm Piyush and I'm going to be your main host in this webinar today. This webinar is going to be conducted in an interview format. We have Tarun with us, who is MIT Sloan Fellow 2022 student, and he's going to share his experiences around it with us today. We'll invite him soon enough, but before we go ahead, quick check on the audio. I just want to ensure that all of you can hear me loud and clear in this. Hello, Bhavuk. Happy to see you here. Okay. So I see that almost all of you can hear me. That's great to know. We'll still wait for a few more votes to come in. I see a lot of people coming in now as well. So great, guys. So again, this is going to be very different from the webinars that we generally conduct. We conduct webinars mostly around GMAT preparation, but today we are going to focus on what is required to have a great application, which even the AdCom will think twice before throwing away. So it's like how can you stand out from the crowd which is there through your application? That's what we are going to discuss today. So great, guys. I'm happy to know that you guys can hear me. So quickly, the structure of the webinar. We are going to have 3 sections to the webinar. I'll talk quickly about who we are, what is that we do at GMAT-West. Then we'll focus on the main part about the applications, and then we go to the Q&A where we're going to spend about 15 minutes or so. And quickly, about GMAT-West, we are world's only truly personalized course in terms of how you prepare. We actually ensure that we use technology, AI to the maximum level to give you a very personalized learning experience. That's what we do at GMAT-West primarily. And we also help you with your applications as well. And then that is also a very personalized service, one-on-one service, where we focus on what are the core strengths and weaknesses of your profile and accordingly help you out. In simple terms, if you're looking at GMAT prep, we help you create a personalized study plan, which is followed by real-time improvement modules, which is followed by dedicated mentor support. So basically, every student on the course gets a different learning module depending on what their strengths and weaknesses are. And that's one of the biggest reasons why till now we have been GMAT Club's most effective course when it comes to average score improvement. If you look at any player who is internationally present on GMAT Club, our average score improvement is the highest in the industry. So that was just about me. Let's quickly move on to the main part of the webinar. How are we going to structure this webinar today? What all are we going to cover today? So obviously, when it comes to applications, there's a lot to talk about. So how we have structured it is going to focus on a subset of it, but we are going to go into the depth of it in an interview format where we are going to hear from Tarun about his experiences. We'll start with the T15 schools because the webinar is going to focus on the T15, the top 15 schools in the US, and we'll focus on what are the components of a strong application. What is that these 15 schools look at, like from a candidate joining the cohort in that particular year. So this is what we are going to focus on next. We will move to then how to go about preparing your application in a step-by-step format, like what you should do, what all things you need to take into account, and all of that. So we'll get into the details of nitty-gritties of every single step of the application, and we'll talk about these steps, what are the important things over there. And then we'll talk about 5 mistakes that one should avoid. That if you are applying to a school, what are the 5 mistakes that many people do, and how you should avoid them and why you should avoid them. So those things we'll also cover. And then we'll open it up for a brief 15-minute Q&A where you guys can ask Tarun any question that you guys have, because as I said, it will be an interview format where primarily I'll be interviewing Tarun, but you guys can also chime in towards the end if you have any questions. What we will not entertain is that individual profile related questions, because that is something which requires a lot more understanding of your profile to give a proper answer. Because if you just look at 2-3 factors that you have these many years of experience from this organization, that is not what defines you as a person, as a candidate. There's much more that we need to know about you in order to give you proper advice. So for that, we will tell you how we can help you with that. But in the Q&A part, it will be more around the generic questions around the application that you might have. We will definitely be taking them up. Doesn't mean that you cannot ask us other questions during the webinar. Feel free to ask those questions as well. I may not pick all of them as part of the interview that I'm going to conduct, but if there are some questions which are definitely related to what we are discussing, I'll be more than happy to take that up. So that's pretty much about the structure of the webinar. So let me tell about Tarun and then I'll invite Tarun. So Tarun, as I said, is a MIT Sloan Fellow 2022 batch. He has 10 plus years, more than a decade of experience in global healthcare and pharma space. He is a TEDx speaker and he has actually been a keynote speaker in many international conferences. He's very vocal about certain causes and he takes active participation on those things. And scored as a 740 on GMAT. Obviously, if he's in MIT, he would have scored a very, very good score on GMAT. So he understands his GMAT really well, has scored 740 over there. Is joining the MIT Sloan Fellow program this fall. So very soon he'll be leaving for MIT. And he has converted multiple other schools, including Cornell. So we'll hear from him now. So let me invite Tarun to join us in the call over here. Hi, Tarun.
Hi, Piyush. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Thank you so much. So I guess all of you can hear Tarun as well. I am able to hear him, but let's hear Tarun. Just a quick chat. Like, so how are you feeling today? As in, like, we know that you had recently recovered from COVID. We had to even cancel one webinar which we were supposed to take like earlier. But just how are you feeling today? Like, all recovered, everything well?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bad case of COVID. I was in hospital for 2 weeks, but thankfully all of it happened before I'm joining school. So I'm recovering now and doing quite better. So thanks for asking.
That's great. That's great. So yeah, I can see that all students can also hear that. So that's great. So Tarun will talk about the top 15 schools again. These are some schools that like you also applied with. So I would want to know like which all schools you picked, why you picked those schools, what was the conversion that you got overall, and any other things that you would like to add.
Sure, absolutely. So Piyush, that's a question I often get from a lot of folks. How to pick schools, and sometimes people only want to focus on the M7, and I'm sure a lot of people here would know what an M7 is. And then some want to focus on top 15, and then they ask, does it make sense to focus on schools which are apart from M7 or T15? So what I would recommend is, and maybe you can have the slideshow on so I can.
Sure.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
So, you have all the logos here. The idea that I had in mind was my industry is healthcare. And then I wanted to focus primarily on schools which are in those pockets of healthcare and biotech ecosystem in the US. So MIT is in Boston. Boston is a biotech hub. Harvard Business School is there. Then I applied to Chicago. No, sorry, not Chicago. I applied to California. Wherein I had Stanford, I had Berkeley Haas in my mind. And then, I was also hedging my bets. That's also important when you are looking for the top tier schools. You should also have certain schools in your safe bucket. That is where I applied to Cornell as well. I applied to Duke. I applied to Michigan Ross. So I applied to about 10, 11 schools, which is maybe against a lot of people what they say that only apply to 4 to 5, you would not get time. But I hedged my bets because one of the reasons I had was my age is on the higher side. So often it's, schools choose younger candidates in their 26, 27. So 30 plus candidates are sometimes harder to find those seats. So yeah, I hedged those bets. And then I would say if you have to select a B school, you have to find like 4 or 5 areas. One, are you comfortable in a larger cohort or are you comfortable in a smaller cohort? Like Wharton, Harvard have class sizes of 800 to 1000. Tuck has a very small class size of about 280. Similarly, are you more comfortable in a metropolitan? Then go to Columbia. Or are you more comfortable in a small city? Maybe Duke or Tuck will be good choices there. Then specialization is another area you can look at. Although the gap between different areas is now thinning, but if you say Duke is very well focused on healthcare, Tuck is very well focused on consulting. New York Stern, Columbia will give you access to those finance folks. So you have to focus on what your profile is and how does it align to each of these schools, and then rank order these schools. So Just don't go by the rankings. I would say the rankings vary by the person. So it has to be different for each one of you.
Very true. In fact, I when I actually speak to students, they come as, okay, I am looking at the top 5, I'm looking at the top 7, and then they tell, like, I ask them, okay, what is that you want to do from an MBA? Many a times they don't even know what they want to do. So it's like randomly they're just picking colleges just because of the rank, and it's very important that you look at the long term picture, like how does it fit in and all of that. So really great points, Tarun. So let's focus on the schools, and let's understand from you, like, what are the components of a strong application that the schools look at when a candidate is applying. And as we were discussing yesterday, some of the points that we talked about, obviously I would want you to talk about those points today. Like, why do you think these are the factors, these factors are very important for the top 15 schools over there?
Absolutely. So, there is no one particular way of finding your path towards a business school. There are various ways you can go about it, but there are certain commonalities which are there in all strong applications. And I think the numero uno among them is the clarity of thought. There are a lot of people sometimes I talk to, they say, I'll go to a B school, I'll then join a VC firm, I'll do this and that. But 90% of the people will think the same way. So how can you keep your application stand out? It just cannot be very open-ended. You have to say, this is the critical path I want to focus on. This is my short-term goal. This is my long-term goal. I align it with your school because of these reasons, and that's why I want to be at your school. So it has to be school specific. It has to be very clear. If it is open-ended, that doesn't help. Another thing that
any example, Tarun, that you want to give over here, just to help.
So recently, I was talking to someone and he was saying that, Tarun, can you have a look at my essays? And one of the things he had written was, he wants, what is the long-term goal? The long-term goal he had written was that he wants to be the director or head of a private equity firm after working for a private equity or a VC firm for some time. Which is very generic. I mean, anyone in finance would want to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we, discussed what is something different that you can do. So is impact investing your way? Is social investing your way? So just tailor and tweak it and think big, that this is what I want to do. Historically, I have worked with a lot of such companies, and this is what makes sense to me. It's just not enough if you just say, there are a lot of VC firms that come to your recruitment. I want to join a VC firm. That just does not cut it. So that's my take on it.
That's a very valid point. So clarity of thought is something which is definitely very important. In fact, when I was there in the US attending the conference with some of the top school adcoms, like at Kellogg's, I was this was one common question that the common response that I heard from the adcoms when they talked about what they look for in a candidate, that okay, they want someone to be very, very clear about why they want to do an MBA and why specifically from that particular program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that's the numero uno thing. But apart from that, there are other components. Of course, academics and GMAT is really important. For US folks, they primarily look at academics and GMAT is secondary. Of course, it matters a lot. But for international students specifically, the GMAT is more important because they are only familiar with certain top universities. If you're not from them, then GMAT is what they primarily look at. And that also determines your output of the application, and often times it helps you get scholarship as well. So focus on that, and I'm sure Piyush is a good expert there.
So Tarun, I get this question asked a lot. A lot of people say that, okay, I am from India and I have let's say 70% in my college in the undergrad. So how does it translate on a GPA scale of 4? And
it does not matter. Just keep the same percentage score I got 66% in my engineering, but I kept
Okay.
66. The GMAT is what matters, because they do not know what is the upper limit. Maybe my university, the topper got only 70%. How do they know all of that, right? So they do not consider that as a decision point. GMAT is a decision point. So don't worry about your academics. Even if you have lower grades in your undergrad, it does not matter. And with a 66% in my undergraduation, I got 11 of the top 15 schools interview calls, and I converted almost 7 of them. So
That's great.
I don't think the academics matter that much from the undergrad side of it.
So that's a great thing to know, because that people think that, okay, unless I have that 80% score, I cannot get into the top schools. And I'm sure GMAT 740 would have definitely helped you get attention over there. So
Yeah, absolutely. For international candidates, GMAT is what matters. And what's done is done. I mean, you can't change your undergrad score. Focus on your GMAT.
And what about, you talked about scholarship also playing like GMAT also playing a role in getting a scholarship. So what's your take on that? A lot of people think, okay, say that, okay, round one scholarships are high chance, like GMAT scores matter, like I need to target how much for a scholarship. So what's the take for the T15 specifically for the scholarship and
So,
GMAT?
again, that's from my experience of all the research and then applying that I've done. There are certain schools which weigh GMAT more than others. There are certain schools which weigh GMAT score less. For example, even if you look at the average GMAT score, so if you see like a 730 average or a 720 average, they really pay a lot of attention, right? Like Columbia gives a lot of weightage to GMAT. Similarly, Ross gives a lot of weightage to the GMAT. So the scholarship also depends, because if you've got a strong GMAT, it always increases your chances. Like I know. Ross gives even 100% scholarship if you got a good score, 740, 750 kind of. And then but yeah, I agree with you that round one application and early round application makes a huge difference. I'll give you an example of MIT this year. I mean, there are very few candidates which are admitted in the later rounds, because the round one cohort was strong. So the disadvantage you get is that if you have a person similar to your profile and he's already been admitted, then your chances decrease a lot. So had you applied in round one, then you could have got through. Whereas because now that seat is already taken, and they have to make sure that diversity is there, people from a lot of other areas are there. So if someone whose profile is exactly like you, then your chances decrease. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So your chances decrease for getting a scholarship significantly, because they have some
absolutely,
quotas for each profile. Okay.
absolutely. And then I'll go to the next points. Uh, Apart from academics and clarity of thought, I think one thing that really helps is international exposure. I would say that don't just limit it to being physically there. You can always highlight experiences where you were doing stakeholder management. You could have collaborated with the team in a different country. You could have, somehow got a client in a different country, and you've been doing a good job there. So any collaboration, it doesn't have to be on site in a different country, but any collaboration where you did stakeholder management with international folks, that shows your global exposure, and that really helps. Another thing is extracurriculars. A lot of people, don't weigh enough on it, but it is really important. And I would divide extracurricular into various areas. You have to make sure you're doing something which is towards the performing arts side, which is more towards a dance or poetry, or some interest in that area. You have to make sure you're doing something on the sports side, or so the things that you're doing in extracurriculars, things you have done in the past, they take it as a point of reference that, okay, this guy will add a lot of value in our cohort, because he's not just limited to academics. He's captained a team. He's done this. So all those experiences really help. and I would tie up extracurriculars and social contribution, because even more important than extracurriculars is what are you contributing to the society? Are you working with an NGO? Are you working? And a lot of people, what they do is, I work for an NGO last 3 months. I mean, that's a strict no. If you haven't, then it's okay to say that you haven't. But then you have to try and find that what kind of community engagement you've done. It can be a blood donation camp, as simple as that, or it can be something where you're while you were working, you helped NGO in any way. So you have to think what you can keep there, but the social contribution, the social community engagement part is extremely important. And then volunteering. We haven't mentioned it here, but volunteering is basically, if say, you're helping a student in his extracurriculars or in his academics, or it can be, if you're good at maths, you're teaching some folks who can't afford to get education. So how can you volunteer in different areas? That's also important.
So then one question here. You said that if you have done like a social work, let's say MGO work in last 3 months, you should not
Yeah.
highlight that much possible, because I see a lot of people doing this. Like they think of the MBA, they say, okay, I've not done any social contribution till now, so let me enroll myself into an NGO and like let's add
So,
some focus on that.
so I don't mean to say don't keep it. What I mean to say is it's a red flag if you've
Okay.
only done something in the last 3 months when you're applying.
Okay.
So rather, if you have done that, it's a trick I'm telling you. Just don't keep the dates. Just say
Okay.
I've done this. Let them ask if they have done. So
Okay. So keep
don't
it
keep.
open ended basically. So you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
saying
yeah.
you've done it for 3 months and
I mean, hiding is always better, right? So, than lying. I mean, so don't lie in your application, and yeah, it doesn't make sense to add dates for the last 3 months. I mean, I would just keep that I volunteered with this organization and I've done this and this.
and
Then
even
focus.
small work matters. If you're doing a volunteer work also in a blood
Absolutely.
donation camp.
And then focus on the impact. If the time is less, then focus on the impact. Like, thousands of people were helped by this effort and all of that. Then impact is important if the time is less. So focus on that.
Okay. Great, great. And with regards to international exposure,
Mhm.
again, I guess Rukmin asked the question, which probably you answered, that even client-related work will also matter. But in the case when a person is actually working in a B2C industry, let's leave aside B2B, working with a B2C industry. In that case, what does one do if they have exposure with international customers, but they're not big customers? So does that count or?
So, an excellent question, Piyush. So, in those cases, what you have to highlight is your cultural expansion or your cultural exposure. How you can highlight it is, I'm dealing with B2C. I deal with people from, or I deal with people who speak 20 different languages,
Okay.
or I deal with people who are from so many different geographies with it, even if it's the same country. India is very huge, right? You
Hmm.
have to spin that story that way, that I've done this where I reached out to so many different folks with a common message and it worked really well. So that spinning of the story is important. But so what I mean by international exposure is you have to show your cultural empathy, that I understand how to deal with people from different backgrounds. International works really well, but the latter part can also work well.
Got it. That's a really nice input. Like even if you are from India, we are a big country, so don't worry about like if you have worked across geographies in India, talk about that as well. Like that's a very important takeaway, because I kind of get this question a lot. Like we have been limited to Indian exposure only, so that's a great point. So what about leadership, Tarun? Again, a lot of people, you had 10 plus years of experience, but let's say someone who is fresher, let's say 2 years or 3 years of experience, how can they go about talking about their leadership or teamwork skills in the applications?
I mean, the honest answer is they should not.
Okay.
So that's why I've kept leadership slash teamwork. So, I mean, the schools know that in 3, 4 years, you will not be in a leadership position. So that is where the teamwork is more important for them. That they collaborated with a team of 10 where they did XYZ and created this impact. So it's just so a lot of people can say, I don't have a leadership experience, I'm not managing a team. That's okay. You can always show teamwork, and even if you have a small team, you can again spin it around in some way or the other, where you can say, I did stakeholder management, and then you can include other stakeholders that you manage, even if they are not part of your own team, but you must have done some stakeholder management, right? So there is always a plan from A to B to C, and it just you just have to create that story. That's more important.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, I was getting some questions around the application part, that how did you go about the entire application? So we have that covered in the next slide. So let's now talk about the step-by-step process of going ahead with the application. So these are some things that we are going to talk about. Tarun, you can feel free to go through it in a organized fashion. That actually,
Sure.
how did you start? Let's say, how did you start with your application when you had to start, like, overall?
I would say for me, it was a long-term dream to be at one of the top institutes. I still sometimes believe, how did it happen? But the primary thing that really gave me the impetus to focus on it was lockdown. I mean, it gave me a chance to give GMAT, and then fortunately got a good score. And then I thought, okay, why not apply to a lot of schools? And I did thorough research, where I want to be, what are my priorities. I looked at 1 year programs, I looked at 2 year programs, primarily focusing on 1 year, and then started with my application. I mean, sometimes I had like 20 versions of my essays, and
Oh my God.
just with it, and coming up with the right version where the story is there. So, and some of the points I'll cover in the coming slides, but it's more like,
Sure.
I you have to create a story for each school. It cannot be a similar story, right? So that's where the first point I would highlight here is what you've written: avoiding common pitfalls in resume. So before even going to a school, or before even going to a essay, the first thing is your resume. And one of the things that I see in a lot of people's resume is it's too technical. So one advice that I always give to people is focus on impact. No one cares what you're doing. Trust me. They do not care if you're working on JavaScript and doing all those technical jargons and all of that. They want to know how all of that has added value to you and your organization. What's the impact? The more you can quantify the impact, the better it is. And maybe we can have another session where I can show you before and after resumes, because it makes a huge difference. And sometimes what people even people don't realize that, oh, this is something that I've done, this is an impact that I've created. And
And most likely B schools, even before opening your application, there's a high chance, again, I don't know how they do it like that.
Absolutely. And you have to understand that the admission folks are not tech experts, or are not subject matter experts. So they will focus on the impact. How has this person used his know-how, knowledge to create this for the organization? So the resume, focus on impact, focus on quantifying your impact. Most important. Then the second most important point is building your story. So you have to build a story which starts right from your childhood. That when you were a child, this is what you learned. As you grew, I know the time is less, so I'll just keep it a bit fast. From the childhood, you did this. That motivated you to do undergraduation, where you did this. Then you planned to join an organization where you gained experience. So you joined these 3 organizations where you gained A, B, and C. Now, after this many years of working, you realize you are really good at A, B, and C, but you have gaps in D, E, and F. And D, E, and F can be anything: operations, teamwork, leadership, anything. and then you say that you see the D, E, and F is something which is really good at school A or school X, and that is the reason I want to go to school X. I'm sorry. That is the reason I want to go to school X, and that's how you create your story. It has to knit right from your childhood to not just the school, but to your long-term goals. And then you say that my long-term goal and the short-term goal is this, and the reason I want to join your school is because this is what I learn from there, and hence I can achieve A and B in my long and short term. So I know it's a long answer which I've just crunched into 2 minutes, but that's the overall summary of it.
So Tarun, over here, like many a times, people struggle to connect these dots. Like there are instances when what they are showing as their long-term goal is something that they have not done. In fact, they have went into a different direction altogether. Let's say a person saying that I want to do finance has worked in a marketing function till now. So how does that guy go about building his story?
So here, a coach really helps. A coach can be your mentor who knows you. It can be your elder brother. It can be a professional coach or a consultant, whatever. But having someone who knows you can brainstorm with him and come up with that dots and connect them. It is extremely difficult if you're alone trying to do it. And it's important to have that family member, a mentor, whosoever you can discuss it with. But having that ear is really important.
So basically, someone who can basically sit with you, make you see what you are not able to see yourself, and
Absolutely.
like take out relevant points which can be used for like the long-term goal. And I personally feel, Tarun, that many a times it is not necessary that you might have an alignment. It's not like we always want that. Okay, school should feel that I always planned my journey from my childhood till now. But sometimes I feel it's okay to accept that, okay, I went in the wrong direction, but hey, look at the kind of learnings that I generated from here, and like this is what makes me an individual.
Piyush, even that's a story. What you just told me, even that's a dot.
Yes.
So I'm not saying it's wrong to commit mistakes. It's okay. All I'm saying is that story also led you to the school, which is what you're applying for, right? So even those learnings led you to here. So that's a story in itself. So I'm not saying it has to be perfect. This is what I planned since I was in kindergarten. No. But what you have to say is that all those experiences led me to this point where I feel I have to be at Kellogg or I have to be at Columbia, and this is the reason I want to be there.
Okay. Got it. Perfect. So I guess one question was there around our next point itself. How does one identify a target school? So the Nawang was saying that I have 13 years of experience. Is it okay for me to apply at a 2-year FT MBA program at M7 schools? I'm actually thinking of saying no, but I would rather ask you, Tarun, what do you think?
I'll be extremely honest there. M7 generally looks at people who are 26 to 28, less than 30. So their percentage of people who are 30 plus is, I would say, less than 10%. And a lot of them are actually veterans in the US. They take those spots. So there is no harm in applying. But if you talk about Harvard's and the Stanford's, it's extremely difficult. What you can do is focus on, if you want to apply for the M7, go for Stanford MSX. That is for people with 8+ years of experience. And then MIT Sloan Fellows, which is for people with 10+ years of experience. Both are 1 year, but they're really good programs. Do research about them. And beyond M7, I think if you apply to T15, it should be okay. And there are a few 1-year ones. Kellogg 1 year should be okay. Cornell 1 year should be okay. But 2-year is hard. In M7, in T15, it's okay.
Did you apply to any of the 2-year programs?
Yes, I did. I applied to Cornell. I applied to Marshall, I applied to Ross, I applied to Haas, I applied to so quite a few. I got through a lot of them. I got through Cornell with a scholarship. I got
Okay.
through Tepper with a scholarship. I was waitlisted with Berkeley, Haas, Ross, and Duke. I pulled out after my MIT
Okay.
convert. So yeah, I mean, you can get through those. My experience is also now 14 years. So it really depends on how you knit that story that this is the right time for me to go for an MBA. It's not impossible, but it's extremely hard in say Harvard or Stanford or what.
So can you discuss a little about how you personally, for your story, like how did you focus on those 2 year programs? Because again, I also get this question a lot of times with people having 8, 10, 11, 15 years of experience. And I generally say that it gets tough, but how do you, like you converted some of the top programs for 2 years. So how did you go about explaining them that right now it's still a right time for you to do a 2 year program, even after these many years of professional experience?
So one of the things I focused on is so you have to be honest there. Uh, so I was extremely honest that why I was not able to do an MBA over the last 5 6 years or whatever, and I mentioned the reasons that this is what I was doing in that time, and right now I feel that I'm hitting the roof in the organization. I didn't use those words. I'm using acronyms here. I'm hitting the roof in my organization, and if I have to grow further and go towards my long-term dream of entrepreneurship, then these are the specifics that I really want to focus on. I'm a BD guy, business development. I've done consulting. I haven't really focused a lot on finance and operations. So I want to learn those aspects at a B school and then further go towards my short and long term goals. So you quantify those aspects that this is what I've done till now. These are the gaps. You have to be extremely comfortable with the gaps. It's okay to be absolutely clear and say, I don't know this. They appreciate it. So that's how I built my story.
And is it possible, like for someone with 10 years plus of experience, that they can talk about changing domains or let's say changing industries at that point of their career in terms of short term or long term goals? Like, is it possible? Is it suggested? What do you think?
It doesn't have to be extremely tangential. So if you ask me, for example, I have focused on the consulting side of it in healthcare, biotech healthcare consulting. I want to move towards a biotech or a healthcare or a pharma company, which is also a domain change, but it's not a shift that huge, right? But if I say tomorrow that I want to go in, say, media agency, I don't have any experience there, right? So the change or the movement you're trying to do, it has to be somewhere aligned to what you've done in the past. It's okay to have movement, but it should not be tangential.
Okay. Okay. So a little bit of relation should definitely stay within what you have
And
done. Like slight tweak can be.
and one more thing, I mean, your goals can change. It's okay to have a goal right now, but when you are at an MBA, you realize, oh, this doesn't make sense. I want to rather the other thing. So it's okay. I mean, you don't have to stick to what you wrote in your application at your MBA. You can always pivot your goals.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. Then. And what about you? You mentioned that connecting your story to schools and essays is very, very important. So, how does one do that? Like, what are the steps that one need to focus on if they have to, let's say, connect the story to
Yeah.
the essays
So
or schools? Like, what all you did, let's say, to get this done?
So, a good question again, Piyush. So, I did a lot of both primary and secondary research. I scrolled through the schools, understood what their values are, understood what the alums are doing, where are they focused. I used LinkedIn extensively. I reached out to a lot of alums from different schools. A lot of them are receptive. A lot of them may not say anything back, but thankfully my LinkedIn profile is good, so people did respond. and so I scheduled like 30 minutes chats with them and understood what did they learn, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what does the school believe in. So you have to understand in depth that this is what a school focuses on. This is the kind of people they want to select. So for a school, what are we? We are just products, right? And so they have to make sure we are unfinished products. They bring us in, and by the time the school ends, we are finished products which companies take from the schools. So all they want to make sure is this product good enough to graduate and go to a company and work well? So that's what you have to connect with the school. And what really helps is talking to alums, doing that research, and understanding what clubs they have, what kind of companies come to their campus, what kind of roles do they give. All of that is really important. And do attend admissions webinars as well. That gives you a lot of information.
Great point, Tarun. In fact, I do remember, like, I was at a point of time planning for my second MBA. I sometimes still think that should be done or not. So at that time, like, I always had this dream of applying, but I never thought about doing this kind of research and all, like that you talked about. That okay, to speak to alums, like attend the webinars and all of this. And when I attended this conference, literally every single like admission officer was talking about this, that you should know the school inside out. You're gonna spend a fortune actually to just do an MBA. And imagine you would go and buy a small laptop or a mobile device. You do so much research on that, like before buying. And if you're gonna spend a fortune and you're doing an MBA, and if you're not doing that research for it, how do we like actually understand whether you're serious about it or not? So that kind of opened my eyes to this thing. And when I say, and again, it seems like everyone should be doing that who is serious, but honestly very few people do. Like when I speak to people and I tell them that okay, you have to do this, they say okay, yeah, this is something which I never thought of, that okay, I should be actually like writing to adcoms. In fact, some people are so hesitant in writing to adcoms that probably the first time adcoms hear their name is when they see the application coming in. So
Yeah.
I also feel that is something which can help you. Like, did you write to any adcoms before, or like, did you interact with adcoms?
Absolutely, I missed that point. I did. I did speak with AdCom as well.
Okay.
For instance, I spoke with MIT AdCom. I understood with them. I mean, I shared my resume with them. I tried to understand, is a 2-year MBA better for me or a 1-year MBA better for me? So they are very nice that ways. You know, they show you the right path. So they asked me to focus on the 1-year MBA because my experience is on the higher side. And so I did speak to other adcoms as well. Not all of them. So I spoke to. It's hard to speak with all of them, right? So I spoke to at least my tier one.
Yes, obviously.
These are my top 5 schools.
With the main target schools, basically, where you want to get to.
So, but tier one, I did not leave any stone unturned.
Got it. Because many times we are like so afraid that okay, we probably schedule a discussion with them, and then let's say we end up speaking something naive, and they kind of reject us at that point of time itself.
But you know, Piyush, you have to do a couple of things before you schedule those conversations. One, you have to do ample secondary research, speak to a couple of alums, because if you ask questions which are already there online, they don't appreciate it, right?
That's a great.
They want to know that you've already done your research and you're scheduling this call to understand things which are not available online. That's one. And second is you have to make sure your resume is top class. So that's why I said the first point is your resume. You should not schedule a call if your resume is not polished, because that's the first thing they look at, and they may say, oh, I don't think this guy fits. So I'll just have a call, but I'm not sure if this guy will fit in our cohort. So don't give that opportunity to them. If you don't have your A-class resume, don't schedule a call.
True, definitely. And the very, very point that resume and both what is there on the website, you should have known it inside out. I remember carrying out a research, maintaining a notebook where I used to have sections dedicated to individual schools and actually noting down every single important aspect, not every single thing with is on the website, but relates to me. I guess we can take. I don't. Okay, let's take the questions a little later. I guess
Yeah, we
it's more
can
about
finish this
individuals. So
couple
let's
of.
talk a little about the interview prep. I guess we have talked about the other aspects. So
Yeah, so
done with the applications.
eh, this is an interesting point. A lot of people ask questions such as, did they focus on the technical part? Did they focus on the job responsibilities? The interviews are majority of the times really a good experience where they just want to know you. You just have to be honest and be yourself. They just want to know, okay, this is the essay, and not every school actually reads your essay before an interview. So some schools have blind interviews where they don't even go through your resume. Some schools where they only give resume to the interviewer, and some schools have where they have complete access to your application. So research first which school has what kind of interviews, right? And then they just want to compare what is there on the piece of paper. Is the guy really the same? And they dig in your motivations, why you are going for an MBA, what motivates you, and the questions can be psychometric. Like some of the questions I faced was, what was the most interesting conversation you've had in the last 30 days? So you just have to think at that time and mention what was the most interesting conversation. Or it can be, what's one word that your peers associate with you. It can be a strength, it can be an area of improvement, whatever. But a lot of questions you have to think on your feet and answer. But the questions will not be too technical. Even if it's technical, it will more focus on the impact. That I see in your resume, you've done this. What kind of an impact did it create for your organization? Give me an example where you struggle to deal with a colleague. Give me an example where your boss did not like you and you had to mend that relationship. So they ask very targeted questions that ways. It's not a interview that we face for a job interview. That's very different. This is more towards motivations and how much do you know about the school. Read up about the clubs they have. Like they can ask, what clubs are you looking forward to join? So you should know what clubs are there, why you want to join a particular club. So yeah, I mean, I know the time is less. There's a lot to talk, but that's what I would say on the interview part.
In fact, sometimes I feel that again, that's just my way of looking at it. That in this interview, it is important that you go and understand, try and for a moment and understand why is that interviewer asking you this question. What is that he wants to know from it? And if you can understand that in a short span of time, obviously you don't have it already to answer that question,
Right.
and you can tailor your answer in that direction. That's probably the best way to handle such, at least on the feet questions. Like think on your feet
Yeah,
questions.
and on the feed questions, Piyush, what I have seen is if they've called me for interview, that means they've liked my application and I was honest in my application. And if it's a question that is tough or hard, the one thing I definitely do is just be honest. I mean,
True.
because if they like the app, they will like my honesty in my interview as well. So there is no better trick than being who you are on the call.
True. True. Definitely. And yeah, last part I think in the application
I
is like
mean, this is a part that we can actually skip. It just focuses on how do you choose a school
uh,
once you have multiple
ethics. Yes,
acceptances. May not be relevant right now, so we can skip for now considering the time.
let's focus on the mistakes. Let's talk about the mistakes that.
Yeah, so these are few common mistakes I would say that I've seen a lot of times. One is not hedging your bets. By that I mean is, I'll only apply to these four schools. These are my top priority. I applied to 11 or 12 or maybe something like that schools. It took a lot of time and effort. But if you are doing it, once in your lifetime, then why not just put in that effort and do it? So I'll give you an example. For example, Yale is a school that I applied, which was my tier two or tier three. But I did not go through. I did not get Yale. The reason being they look for a younger cohort. The reason can be anything. But I got MIT. So had I applied to Yale and few other schools and not applied to MIT or a Cornell or somewhere else, then I would think, oh man, I got 4 rejects. What do I do? So always hedge your bets. Have a list of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 in your mind and apply to those schools. I know it costs. I know the effort is there, but you don't want to repent later. I should have applied there. So have that bets hedged. Second is starting too late. I see a lot of people who focus on let me just do GMAT first. Let me just do GMAT first. I'll identify the schools based on the score that I get. I think that's absolute rubbish. You always have a good idea of what score you can get from the mocks that you're getting, or you have a target GMAT score in your mind, and you have to make sure you achieve that. And you can always start building your applications, or at least building your resume while you're doing your GMAT. So don't leave it for too late, because then you are in a chaotic environment. Oh my God, I didn't get my target score. My deadlines are coming. I have to write LORs. I have to write essays. I have to write resume. It's a chaos. So do the things side by side if you have time.
And especially the things that you also talked about, that okay, you should be connecting with the alums, you should be connecting on LinkedIn. Those you cannot do on the last moment. Like just
yeah. Takes a lot of time, months in advance. You have to do that, and always target round 1. I mean, AdCom will say that politically correct answer. Oh, R1 and R2 is the same. That's just not how it works. Focus on R1.
And you applied in which round, Tarun? Like just
I applied everything in R1.
R1 itself. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Someone is saying that when is it too late? Like we talk about starting too late. So again, I know it's a difficult question to answer, but
that's a good question. I'll give you my example. I thought I will go ahead for GMAT this year in May end. Then I prepared for about a couple of months. Simultaneously, I connected with alums and resume work I did. That was in June and July. August first week, I gave my GMAT, but by that time I was extremely confident I'll get a good score because my mocks were really good. August end or July last week, something like that. And by then I had my resume and the story with me. And from August to September and October, I was completely focused on the applications. So that should give a good timeline. I mean, but still I felt I was a bit late. You should start on your applications in June, July. That's a good time because that gives you some leverage.
Okay. So I think that
too late is August. I mean, if you start in August, you're done. I mean, it's extremely hard that time.
Great. I hope this answers Kamzi's question. Kamzi was the one who asked this, so that's good. So yeah, we can continue forward.
Yeah. So the third important point is never use the same essays for multiple schools. You can use aspects of it, and Piyush can tell you a story about one. But why don't you go ahead and share that?
Yeah, so this is a story which is a real story that happened with me when I was at this conference. Every AdCom was called on the stage and alongside a fireside chat, and there were some questions being asked. So to Harvard or Duke, one of the schools, like the AdComs, the question that was asked was what throws you off, or what is the silliest thing or the worst mistake that you have seen a person doing in their application. So they say, okay, I was opening this application from a student, and it still says that I want to join the other school or the other city, and they did not even care to change the name of the school or the city, and they sent the same application to us. How does this show the strength of the focus of the student? They're just copy pasting the content everywhere and changing the name.
So that was a horrendous error. That straight away says you're not getting selected. But the errors can be subtle. The application teams are extremely strong in that. They know what is the essay of Harvard. They know what is the essay of Columbia. If they find those elements which you may have picked from there, they do not appreciate that. So focus on their values. Colombia has different set of values from a Haas. So you have to focus on their values and build your essays from scratch. Use certain elements which are for your own, which focus on your own self. Like you work with these teams, you focus on that. Always replicate that. But when it comes to the school aspects, never ever use the same essay. The fourth point is writing the LORs yourself. Again, you have a particular writing style. A lot of times the recommenders can say, just send it to me, whatever you want me to write. Never do that. The LORs have to come from them, and the language, they can easily identify that, oh, this guy has written both the essay and the LOR. They're experts in that. And that straight away can say rejection. So don't do that mistake. And the fifth thing, I think I talked about it a bit, keeping resume too technical. Don't do that. So I know the time is less. I'll open for questions, or whatever is the plan. I can spend a few more minutes if you want.
Yes, I think we're good to start with the questions, because these are the common things that we wanted to talk about. So now we can take up questions from the students. Let me see for particular. Again, as I said, I'm not gonna take up profile specific questions, because if you have profile specific question, we would rather want to connect with you personally to discuss them. And in fact, you guys can connect with Tarun as well. All you need to do is just send us an email on support@gmatters.com. Like, the profile evaluation is a chargeable service. We charge you $50 for a half an hour call with Tarun, but that helps us advise you in the right possible way. We work with your CV, see exactly how it works. So other than profile evaluation, any other questions that are there, I'll be taking it up. So I have a question from Rukmin. He says, with around 5 years of experience, is it better to apply to ISB or a T15 colleges in US? College in US. Again, I know it's a broad question.
Depends on your career goals. And if you want to be in India, ISB, there is no better place. If you want to be a global citizen, then definitely T15. Globally, the T15 has a far better value than ISB. But if you just want, if you're focused, I want to be just in India, then go for ISB.
Okay, perfect.
I also see a question from Nawang.
Yes, how tough is it to have a?
It's to do with MIT Sloan MBA.
Yes. Yeah, please take it up.
So he's asking, is it challenging to get a 1 year executive MBA? So it depends. There are a lot of courses which are. So, for example, at MIT, the executive MBA is different from the Sloan Fellow MBA and the 2-year MBA. So the both the 1 year and the 2-year MBAs at MIT are OPT. So you get 1 + 2. That means 3 years of work authorization, and in that time you can apply for your H1B and other things. So I don't think that's a challenge. So.
And what is the difference, like between the MIT Sloan Fellow and the traditional, like 1 year when you are going for the MIT Sloan Fellow program, it's not really the executive program, basically. Right. So you will be getting that option of the OPT.
The only difference between the Sloan Fellows and the 2-year MBA is it's 1 year, that's 2 years. Okay. And the other major difference is the average age of experience for 2-year MBA is 5-6 years, and the average age of experience for a 1 year Sloan Fellows MBA is about 14 years. So mostly it's, I would say, global leaders who come from different countries. Sloan Fellows is more international. 2-year is bit less percentage international. You study the same subjects. You study this. Your coursework is a little crunched because you only have 12 months. The 2 years have 22 months, but they also have a internship in between of 3 months. So that's the major difference.
Great. I have one more question from Shubham. He says, does patents related to a technical field a good thing to put in MBA application? Does it help in making a strong application?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Okay, so I'm saying Shubham is asking, does patents related to technical fields a good thing to put in MBA applications? Does it help in making strong applications?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I am just looking at it. So Shagnik had a question again. I think we have answered this. He's saying, "What if I have a good GPA but an average GMAT score, say 620 to 650? Will it be helpful in getting to a top B school?" I guess we
Absolutely.
answered that, but
We answered that. Maybe he joined late, but academics for international students are important, but GMAT is far more important. So if you get a good score, that's good.
yeah. So you need to have a good score in GMAT. Even if you have a good GPA overall, you still need to do well on GMAT. Basically,
Absolutely, absolutely.
perfect. Great. So I don't see any other question. There was one question from Lakshmi, which was around the profile. Lakshmi, you can connect with like Tarun if you want. Like just send us an email on this ID, and we will connect you, help you connect with him. Let's see. Okay, I don't see any other questions. If anyone else has any questions, we'll be happy to take it up. What kind of element in profile is helpful in scholarship? About it, maybe you joined a little late, but like scholarships are multiple scholarships are available. Like there are merit-based scholarships, there are profession-based scholarships, also geography focused scholarships as well. So you have to look at the different kind of scholarships that particular program is offering, because a program may not be offering one kind of scholarship when they could be offering the other kind. But in general, Tarun, do you think that GMAT score or past academic background play a role in all kind of scholarships, or how is that?
It depends from school to school, Piyush.
Okay.
It's a difficult question to answer in like 5 minutes. I mean, but the things that we talked about, which are the 6 points that we said are important for a strong application, those 6 points also help in getting scholarships. So if you keep them strong,
Okay.
and majority of the schools you don't have to apply scholarship separately. It's part of your application automatically. So you don't have to do anything else apart from submitting your application in majority of the schools.
True. Okay, very nice. Okay, so Shagnik has another question. I think this is something which some people also ask. So he's saying, I have 2 years of experience and I'm planning for fall 2022. I'm assuming he's looking at US schools. He's saying that is 3 years good enough to get into a good school, or how much work experience should I look at?
So yeah, I think 3 to 4 years is okay. 5 is ideal, or I would say 4 to 5 is ideal, because the only challenge I'm seeing in applications of 2 3 years or 3 years experience is you don't have enough. I say that masala in your professional life that you can share with the adcom committee, because the first few years are formative years and you don't have that strong profile per se. So 4 to 5 is ideal, I think.
So if someone has 2 3 years of experience, they should only apply if they feel that they have enough masala or enough things to
Yeah,
showcase. Otherwise, they should wait rather and
yeah.
like
Wait a couple of years, then yes,
and have that masala on their application also. Not just wait, make sure they do
absolutely.
something.
I saw a question on mock tests. I only majorly focused on GMAT official tests. I did not give any other tests. So I don't think they are representative. So focus on the GMAT mocks.
And what was the deviation that you were getting between your scores? Just
Very less. My least was I think 7, 10, 20, and my highest was 760.
okay.
So I was
You
happy.
landed somewhere in between, basically.
Yeah.
So Lakshmi and a few people are asking whether the recording will be available. Yes, anyone who has registered for this webinar, they will be getting the recording. So don't worry about it. If you miss something, you can watch it again, get that recording, and don't worry about that.
And to answer Sahil's question, yes, you get this exact same degree for MBA.
So
Yeah.
Ruhi, I think, had a question. Does green card make difference for EMBA? Again,
So, I mean, for an EMBA, it's a very different story. And you have to be a US resident. And yes, I mean, you can go for an EMBA if you're a US resident. It doesn't, so EMBA is not for international folks.
Perfect. So I don't see any other question that is there in the poll. So very quickly, one more thing. In case we also provide application services from our side. So again, Tarun also works with GMATWiz as a consultant. He's in fact working with a couple of three students right now who have actually scored 730 30s plus on the GMAT, and like working with him for the top schools. So we actually provide you a service where we do an end-to-end work, starting from your story formation to school selection to essay review, resume review, and interview prep. So the biggest part that we start with is story formation, because as I said, the most important part is having the right story in place. Because if that is done well, everything else is a natural outcome of it. So we spend a lot of effort on that. Generally, like 3 schools is what we work minimum for. The charges are $1,099, but anyone who has attended this webinar in real time, like, is getting a special offer. They can actually get the same for $100 less, which is $999. So in case you want to work with us, work with Tarun, you can still do that. Tarun is available to till I guess July end, right? Tarun, like,
Yeah,
we
that's
have
right.
time till then. So you guys can reach out to us, let us know. And for profile evaluation also, as I said, you guys can connect with us. We will help you reach out to Tarun. It's a paid service, but yeah, we charge $50 for half an hour call, and you guys can share your profile and discuss with it. I guess, can we take two more questions, Tarun? Just last two.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So Girish is asking, would you be comfortable in sharing if you should be pursuing for MBA or MS in MIT Sloan? Again, Girish, that is slightly different. Again, difficult to answer, because honestly, MBA and MS are two different things altogether.
No,
Like,
I think Girish knows that school well. Uh,
okay, okay,
so they have an option to go for an MS as well. But
okay,
I'll be going for an MBA. I mean, I hate thesis, so I'll just go for an MBA.
okay. So MIT Sloan allows you to
They have an
do an
option to
MS.
go for an MS as well.
Okay, okay. Where you do need to do more thesis work rather than project related work. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great, great. Okay. One question more. Okay. Uh, uh, okay, one last thing. So Vibhor is saying extended styles question on the degree awarded at the end of the program. Does it affect the job placements as well? I don't.
No, I mean, see, the job placements are very different for a 5, 6 year experienced guy and a 15 years experienced guy. So, a lot of times the on campus is something that doesn't work for a 15 years experienced guy. So, you have to network and use the network to land up the right roles. So, it's not the same. It depends on what part of your career you are in, and hence you apply for those roles. It's not just like it happens in India that companies come and you sit in those. That's just 30-40% of it. The rest is also about networking, reaching out to folks, and not just sitting with twiddling your thumbs and waiting for companies. So yeah, I mean that's a short answer. And just last question, I mean, Arvind, just I think asked again. Yes, you can apply to both 2 year and 1 year MBA in the same school within the same year. You can do that.
But will you recommend doing so?
No harm. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was advised by the AdCom to go for the 1 year MBA, but I still just hedged my bets and applied to both.
Okay.
But I got a call only for the 1 year MBA because I knew the AdCom had already told me. So, uh, I mean, there is no
That's
harm,
good.
but you need to have a story. Like, for example, Stanford, for the MSX and MBA, there is an option to apply both of them together. But in your essays, you have to mention why MSX 1 year or why MBA 2 year. So you have to build and knit that story together, which may be difficult at times. If the applications are different like MIT, then it's okay. But for Stanford, it's a bit of a challenge.
Okay. Okay. Great. Then it was really great having you here, Tarun. So glad to hear from you about the entire journey, and I'm sure like a lot of learnings have come for the entire batch that was there with us. Feel free to reach out to
So,
us in case you have any other questions.
So, Piyush, I'll just take this Ruhi's last question, which just
Okay.
popped up.
Okay.
It's a very good question, Ruhi. In fact, I interacted with a lot of such companies, SBC, I don't even remember the names of a lot of companies. But for them, we are just like it's difficult to connect a story. That's what I saw. Like no one was believing in my story. I spoke to a lot of such folks internationally, and then they're like, oh, you have 13 years of experience. I don't think you will get anywhere. Even if you have a 740, it doesn't make sense. Don't apply it here, don't apply it there. So you want someone who believes in your story, not someone who just. So if those guys believe in your story, go for them. But yeah, the most important point here is someone believing in your story. That's what really helps in the longer run.
True. Great, guys.
Okay. So yeah.
Thank you, Pep. Thank you, Tarun, for this discussion. And we will be doing more such discussions in the future. So be on the lookout on your emails in case of the NASA schedule. Thank you so much, everyone.
Sure. Thanks, Piyush.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.